There's a moment that comes to every parent when you realize your children have stopped needing you the way they once did. The phone calls grow shorter, the visits become less frequent. Their lives pull them in directions you never imagined when you held them as babies, and somewhere in that beautiful chaos of their becoming, a quiet fear settles in your chest. Will they remember you when you're gone? Will they miss you, or will you become just another burden they had to carry? You watch them rush through their busy lives, and you wonder if there's still a place for you in their world. You see other elderly people sitting alone in restaurants, waiting by phones that never ring, and something cold grips your heart. Is this your future too? But here's what most parents never realize. The ones who are missed most deeply aren't the ones who sacrificed everything or worried constantly or called every day. The ones who leave holes in their children's hearts are those who learned a secret that changes everything. They discovered that being unforgettable has nothing to do with how much you give and everything to do with who you become. The woman down the street learned this the hard way. For years, she called her daughter every morning, offering advice that wasn't asked for, expressing worry about every decision. Then one day, she stopped, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. She began living her own life with such quiet grace that her daughter started calling her instead, hungry for that peaceful presence that had replaced the anxious mother she once knew. What happened next surprised everyone, including her. Her children didn't drift away when she stopped chasing them. They came closer. They began to miss her before she was even gone, because she had transformed from someone they felt obligated to manage into someone they genuinely wanted to be around. This transformation isn't about playing games or manipulating emotions. It's about understanding something profound. Your children will miss you most when your love feels like warm sunlight instead of heavy chains. When your presence becomes a gift rather than a burden. When they remember you as someone who made their lives better simply by being authentically, peacefully yourself. The secret lies in 10 gentle practices that have nothing to do with what you do for your children and everything to do with who you become for yourself. These aren't strategies to win their attention. They're ways of living that create such genuine peace and authenticity that your absence becomes impossible to fill. The first way to become irreplaceable is to stop performing the role of the perfect parent and start being the real person you actually are. Your children have spent their entire lives watching you sacrifice pieces of yourself for their benefit. They've seen you worry, struggle, and give until you had nothing left. Now they need to see something different. They need to witness you honoring yourself with the same devotion you once gave them. A neighbor shared something that broke my heart and changed my perspective forever. She said, "I spent 30 years being the mother I thought they needed. Then I spent 5 years being the woman I actually am. Guess which version they miss when I'm not around?" When you stop apologizing for your preferences, when you make choices based on your genuine values rather than what you think others want to hear, when you speak your truth without harshness but also without fear, something magnetic happens. You become someone worth knowing, not just someone worth loving out of obligation. Your children have plenty of people in their lives who tell them what they want to hear. What they lack is someone who models what it looks like to live authentically. When you show them it's possible to be real without being harsh, genuine without being difficult, they don't just respect you more. They start to crave that authenticity in their own lives, and they'll miss having someone who reminded them what that looks like. The second practice seems almost too simple to matter, but it creates memories that last lifetimes. Become someone they associate with specific, beautiful sensory experiences. The way you smell when they hug you, the particular tea you always drink, the song you hum while moving through your daily routines. These small consistencies become emotional anchors that tie them to you long after you're gone. Someone told me about visiting her grandmother's house 20 years after she passed away. The new owners had changed everything, but when she walked through the kitchen, she caught the faintest trace of her grandmother's hand cream, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, feeling completely loved and safe. That's the power of sensory memory. Choose one signature scent and use it consistently. Develop rituals they associate specifically with you. Maybe it's the way you arrange flowers, or the careful attention you give to folding clothes, or the particular cup you always use for your morning coffee. These aren't grand gestures, they're the quiet details that become sacred to those who love you. Years from now, when they catch that familiar fragrance in a store or hear that song you always hummed, they'll be transported instantly back to your presence. They'll miss not just you, but the specific ways you moved through the world that no one else can replicate. They'll ache for the sensory comfort of your nearness in ways that will surprise them with their intensity. The third way to embed yourself permanently in their hearts requires courage. Tell your most meaningful stories with deep emotion and vivid detail, but only once. Most parents make the fatal mistake of repeating the same stories until their children learn to tune them out. Instead, choose your most important memories and share them like precious gifts when the moment feels exactly right. Tell them about the day they were born, but paint it like they've never heard it before. Share the vulnerability you felt, the overwhelming love that changed you forever, the specific details that made that moment sacred. Describe your own childhood in ways that help them understand where their traits come from, but focus on the emotions and fears and hopes rather than just the facts. When you share a story once with genuine feeling, it becomes a treasure. When you repeat it endlessly, it becomes background noise. Your children will carry the stories you shared intentionally and miss the wisdom you offered sparingly rather than constantly. They'll remember feeling honored to receive your memories rather than trapped by them. One of the most powerful things you can do is write each child a letter they'll treasure forever. Not a guilt-laden confession or a list of regrets, but a letter that acknowledges the complete truth of your relationship while offering your unconditional blessing for their future. This becomes an emotional inheritance that money can't provide. In this letter, apologize for your specific mistakes without asking for forgiveness. Acknowledge the ways you fell short while celebrating the amazing person they became. Tell them what you admire about who they've become. Bless their choices, even the ones you might not have made yourself. Give them permission to live their authentic lives without worrying about disappointing you. Someone shared with me that she found a letter like this in her mother's jewelry box after she passed away. 20 years later, she still returns to those words when she needs to feel her mother's love and acceptance. Your children will miss having someone who knew them from their first breath and loved them unconditionally through every phase of their becoming. The fifth practice might be the most transformative. Become a source of peace rather than anxiety in their lives. Your adult children already carry enough stress, worry, and difficult decisions. When you become someone who radiates calm acceptance rather than fearful concern, you become a refuge they'll desperately miss when it's gone. This means learning to trust their judgment even when you disagree with their choices. It means offering support without trying to control outcomes. It means being someone they can call when life feels overwhelming, knowing you'll remind them of their own strength rather than adding to their burden with your worries. The elderly woman who lives across from the park discovered this by accident. After years of expressing concern about every decision her son made, she decided to try something different. When he called to tell her about a job change she wasn't sure about, instead of listing her worries, she said, "You've never made a decision that didn't teach you something valuable. I trust your wisdom." He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I needed to hear that more than you know. When your children think of you, they should feel lighter, not heavier. They should remember someone who believed in their resilience and provided steady love without conditions attached. They'll miss that feeling of unconditional acceptance more than any specific advice you might have given." The sixth way to become unforgettable requires perhaps the most courage. Acknowledge your failures as a parent honestly, make amends where possible, then forgive yourself and focus on being better without drowning in guilt. Every parent makes mistakes that affect their children. The ones who become truly beloved aren't those who never failed, but those who took responsibility for their failures and then demonstrated growth. Your healing frees your children to love you fully without feeling responsible for managing your regrets. When you carry shame and keep apologizing, you burden them with the job of reassuring you. When you make peace with your imperfections and show them through your actions that people can change and grow at any age, you give them something infinitely more valuable than perfection. A woman at the community center shared something profound. I spent years apologizing to my daughter for not being the mother I thought she deserved. Finally, she said, "Mom, I don't need you to be sorry anymore. I need you to be happy." That's when I realized my guilt was stealing her joy too. Your children don't need perfect parents to miss them deeply. They need authentic ones who took responsibility for their mistakes and kept evolving throughout their lives. They'll miss the parent who showed them that people can heal, change, and become better versions of themselves at any stage of life. The seventh practice is surprisingly powerful. Learn to laugh at yourself with genuine warmth rather than harsh self-criticism. When you can find joy in your own quirks and mistakes, when you can tell stories about your failures with lightness rather than shame, you become someone people love to be around. Humor makes you human and accessible. It shows your children that you don't take yourself so seriously that you can't enjoy life's absurdities. They'll remember a parent who could find lightness even in difficult situations, and they'll miss that gift of perspective that helped them navigate their own challenges with grace. The grandmother who babysits for the young family next door has mastered this art. When she accidentally put salt instead of sugar in the cookies, instead of berating herself, she laughed and said, "Well, that's one way to cut down on dessert." Her granddaughter still talks about those salty cookies and how grandma's laughter made even mistakes feel like adventures. Your laughter becomes a bridge between generations. When you can joke about getting older, about technology confusing you, about the ways your body doesn't cooperate the way it used to, you invite your children to see aging as something that can be approached with joy rather than dread. They'll miss your lightness in a world that often feels too heavy. The eighth way to remain interesting to your children is to let them witness your continued growth and curiosity. Don't allow them to see you as someone whose learning days are over. Read books that surprise you, develop interests you never had time for before. Change your mind about things you once felt certain about. Show them that wisdom includes the willingness to keep evolving. When you surprise them with new insights, different perspectives, or unexpected passions, you remain fascinating to them as a person, rather than just beloved as a parent. They'll miss conversations with someone who stayed curious about life, who could still be amazed by beauty, who approached each day with openness rather than resignation. A man in his 70s started learning to paint after his wife passed away. His children were amazed to discover this artistic side of their father they'd never known existed. "I feel like I'm getting to know a whole new person," his daughter told me, "and I love spending time with this version of Dad." Your willingness to grow gives them permission to keep changing throughout their own lives. The ninth practice requires the most emotional maturity. Give your children complete freedom to live their authentic lives without making them feel guilty for their choices. This includes their choice to live far away, to visit less often than you'd prefer, to make decisions you wouldn't make, and to prioritize their immediate families over extended family obligations. Your unconditional acceptance becomes a gift they'll treasure forever. When they know they can live their truth without disappointing you, when they feel supported rather than judged, they actually want to stay more connected. The parents who release their children with love are the ones their children choose to return to voluntarily. Someone shared with me that her mother said something that changed everything. "I raised you to fly, not to stay in my nest. Watching you soar is the greatest gift you could give me." That freedom to live without guilt became the foundation for a deeper relationship than they'd ever had before. They'll miss the rare experience of feeling completely accepted by someone who has no agenda for their lives except their happiness. In a world full of conditional relationships, your unconditional love becomes irreplaceable. They'll miss having someone who loved them without needing them to be different than they are. The final practice creates the deepest connection of all. Love them from a place of inner wholeness rather than emotional need. When your love feels like warm sunlight rather than desperate clinging, when your support comes from abundance rather than emptiness, you become someone they're drawn to rather than someone they feel obligated to manage. This requires doing the inner work of finding fulfillment and meaning in your own life, independent of their choices. When you're genuinely content with yourself, your love for them flows freely, without hidden expectations attached. They can receive it as pure gift rather than complicated obligation. Your peace becomes contagious. They'll miss being around someone who reminded them that happiness is possible, that life can be beautiful, even in its later chapters, that love doesn't have to be heavy with unmet needs. They'll miss the way your presence reminded them of their own worth without requiring them to prove it. The elderly couple who walks their dog every evening embodies this perfectly. They're clearly devoted to each other and their family, but they've also created a rich, full life together. When their grandchildren visit, they feel like they're entering a warm, peaceful bubble where love flows freely in all directions. Those children will miss that feeling for the rest of their lives. When these 10 practices become woven into the fabric of how you live, something miraculous happens. Your children don't just love you out of duty or loyalty, they genuinely enjoy your company. They seek your presence because it adds something valuable to their lives, rather than because they feel guilty if they don't. You become someone they miss before you're gone, someone whose absence is felt immediately when visits end. Not because you've made them dependent on you, but because you've become someone whose unique blend of wisdom, acceptance, and authenticity enriches their lives in ways that no one else can replicate. The transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't require perfection. It requires the courage to be authentic, the wisdom to love without conditions, and the patience to let relationships deepen naturally, rather than forcing closeness through guilt or manipulation. The most beautiful part of this approach is that it benefits you as much as it benefits your children. When you focus on becoming your most authentic, peaceful, and loving self, you create a life worth living regardless of how often your phone rings. You become someone you enjoy being, someone whose company you value, someone whose story feels meaningful and complete. Your children will sense this shift in you, this movement from anxiety about being loved to confidence in your own worthiness of love. They'll be drawn to the peace you radiate, the wisdom you offer without forcing, the unconditional acceptance you provide without keeping score. Something profound happens when you stop measuring your worth by how much your children need you and start discovering your value as a complete human being who has lived, learned, and grown through decades of experience. You stop being someone who requires management and become someone who offers gifts that can't be found anywhere else. The secret to being deeply missed isn't found in what you sacrifice for others. It's found in who you become for yourself. When you honor your own life with the same devotion you once gave your children, when you treat yourself with the kindness you've always shown others, you become someone worth knowing, worth loving, and yes, worth missing, with the kind of deep ache that proves love was real. Your children already love you. The question isn't whether they'll mourn your passing. The question is whether they'll miss the specific way you moved through the world, the particular gifts you brought to their lives, the irreplaceable presence that was uniquely yours. When you live according to these gentle principles, the answer becomes beautifully, certainly yes. They'll miss your laughter echoing through conversations. They'll miss the way you listened without trying to fix everything. They'll miss your stories told with perfect timing and deep feeling. They'll miss your unconditional acceptance of their choices. They'll miss the peace they felt in your presence, They'll miss the way you saw the best in them, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Most of all, they'll miss having someone in their lives who loved them not for what they achieved or how often they visited, but simply for the miracle of who they are. That kind of love, freely given and peacefully held, becomes irreplaceable. And when you live from that place of abundant love, being missed becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Your legacy won't be measured by how much you worried about them or how many sacrifices you made. It will be measured by how much joy you brought to their lives, how much peace you modeled for them, and how deeply they felt loved in your presence. When you focus on creating that kind of legacy through how you live each day, being missed becomes the natural result of a life well lived and love well given. The day you stop needing them to validate your worth is the day they start truly seeing your value. The moment you begin living for your own authentic joy is the moment you become magnetic to those who love you. The second you release them with complete freedom is the second they choose to come closer. This isn't manipulation. It's transformation. It's the difference between loving from emptiness and loving from fullness. It's the difference between being someone your children feel obligated to tolerate and being someone they genuinely treasure. It's the difference between being forgotten and being unforgettable. If this touches something true in your heart, if you recognize yourself in these words or feel called to become this kind of presence in your children's lives, remember that every small step toward authenticity, peace, and unconditional love moves you closer to becoming irreplaceable in the hearts of those who matter most to you.